All right, today we're diving into a really fascinating piece of fertility tech. We're talking about a tiny little chip that, believe it or not, promises to rig the race for the strongest sperm. But does the science actually back up the hype? Let's find out.
Yeah, that's really the big question here, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about a technology that's designed to give a helping hand in the very first moments of life. So how on earth does it work? And maybe more importantly, is it the game changer that so many people were hoping for?
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, let's start with a pretty cool analogy. Just picture a microscopic obstacle course, like a final tiny challenge for sperm right before the big race. Now, the official name for this is microfluidic sperm sorting, or MSS. And what it is really is a small chip filled with these microscopic channels. They're actually designed to mimic the natural journey that sperm have to take inside the body. The goal here is super simple. Filter out the weaker swimmers so that you're left with only the strongest, healthiest candidates to move forward.
And that's why that obstacle course analogy works so well. By making the sperm navigate these tiny little channels, the chip basically separates the best of the best, the most motile, the healthiest ones from all the rest. You could almost call it Darwinian selection, but on a microchip. So the big question is, how is this any different from what clinics were already doing?
All right, let's do a little head-to-head comparison. The new chip method versus the traditional techniques that fertility clinics have been relying on for decades.
Okay, so what's really fascinating here is the totally different approach. The traditional methods, things like swim up or density gradient, they use a centrifuge. They're basically spinning the sample at super high speeds. And look, it works, but all that force can actually cause damage to the sperm's DNA. But then you have the microchip method. It completely avoids that harsh spinning. Instead, it uses these gentle fluid dynamics to just let the best sperms swim through on their own. The whole point is to end up with healthier sperm, with their DNA perfectly intact.
So you can imagine, this gentler, more natural approach got a lot of people excited. And the early results, well, they were pretty incredible. Let's take a look at the initial promise this technology really showed.
When this tech first hit the scene, the buzz was huge. I mean, the logic behind it made perfect sense, and the first bits of data that came out seemed to point to a genuine breakthrough in fertility treatment.
And this right here, this is exactly why everyone was so excited. There was this key study back in 2019 that compared the microchip to a traditional method for IUI treatments. And just look at the difference in the ongoing pregnancy rates. The microchip group hit over 15%, compared to just about 9% for the standard method. I mean, that is a huge, potentially life-changing jump. In fact, it gets even more dramatic. After they controlled for other factors, that same study found that the microchip method led to a nearly 3.5 times higher chance of an ongoing pregnancy. A number like that, wow, you can absolutely see why the fertility world was buzzing. But, as we all know, science is rarely that straightforward. And that, right there, brings us from the promise to the proof. Because as more and more researchers started putting this tech to the test, well, the picture started to get a lot murkier. It seemed like for every one of those promising studies, another one would pop up with completely different results. A lot of the research just couldn't replicate those incredible improvements we saw earlier. And just like that, a real scientific debate started to heat up.
Yeah, just take a look at this chart. This is from a different study, and this time they were looking at live birth rates. And what did they find? A traditional method, swim up, actually did better than the microchip. Now, it's super important to note that the results weren't statistically significant, but the point is, the evidence is all over the place.
And this quote from a big review in 2021, it just perfectly sums up where things stand. Basically, the researchers said, hey, we need more studies. We need bigger, better, randomized, controlled trials to figure out if this chip is actually better, about the same, or maybe even worse than what we're already using. Plain and simple, the jury is still out.
So all this scientific uncertainty, that's a huge reason you don't see this microchip in every single fertility clinic. But it's not the only reason. There are some other really practical barriers in the way too.
So why isn't this thing the standard practice yet? Well, first off, as we've just seen, the evidence is a total mixed bag. But on top of that, you've got these real-world hurdles. It costs a lot. It needs special equipment. There isn't even one standard way to do it. And to top it all off, a lot of patients and even doctors just don't know it exists.
Let's zoom in on that cost for a second. We're talking about an add-on that can tack on anywhere from $120 to over $600 to a single treatment cycle. And remember, that's on top of what are already really expensive treatments. And this is a really big deal for a treatment like IUI. You see, a lot of couples choose IUI specifically because it's a more affordable starting point than jumping straight to IVF. So when you start adding hundreds of dollars to every single attempt, it kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? It pushes the total cost way up, getting closer to what a full IVF cycle might cost anyway.
So, where does all this leave us? Is this little microchip just a cool idea that's not quite ready? Or does it have a real future in fertility medicine?
Well, given the shaky evidence and that high price tag, the question really changes. It's not, is this for everyone anymore? It's more like, is this for anyone? Are there any specific situations where this thing might actually be worth it? And the current thinking is probably yeah, but only for very specific groups. It seems like this technology might make the most sense for patients who have known issues, like high sperm DNA fragmentation, or maybe for couples who've gone through multiple treatment failures without any clear reason, or those dealing with certain kinds of male factor infertility.
And that right there is really the bottom line. For now, you should think of microchipped sperm sorting as a niche, specialized tool. It's an add-on for certain tough cases, not some universal upgrade that every single person doing fertility treatments should automatically choose.
Which brings us to our final big question. The promise of this thing is undeniable, right? A gentler, maybe more natural way to pick the best sperm. But it's being held back by two huge things: a lack of solid proof and a hefty price tag. So you have to wonder, if those two barriers come down, could this tiny chip one day become a standard part of starting a family for millions of people? I guess only time and a whole lot more research will tell.